In this video, we'll discuss the features on Jeffrey Dahmer's face that point to a cold, apathetic, and distant consciousness, as well as a marker for lifestyle depletion. Enjoy. In today's face reading, we're looking at Jeffrey Dahmer. So, unfortunately, Jeffrey Dahmer was very famous for being a serial killer and went on a killing spree. He ended up dying in prison from another inmate years back. So, a subscriber had asked that I read him, so I'm doing that today. If you are new to my channel and you've never seen a face reading, please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. That will give you terms and terminology about what this is, but face reading is a branch of Chinese medicine, and some of the things that I will say, some of the terms I'll use, if you're not familiar with them, you'll be lost. So please go watch that if you're new. When I was looking at his face, what I wanted to talk about first was the Shen, the countenance of the spirit. So for review, the Shen is the immaterial light that comes out of a person's face. It's essentially the vibe or feeling we pick up when we look at someone's face. We get a good feeling or a bad feeling, and that is relative depending on the person. A criminal looking at another criminal might get good vibes because they're the same, but someone who is in opposition, someone who's not a criminal, and someone who is, are going to usually have some kind of tension. So in any case, we want to pay attention to this immaterial look that comes out of the face. And the reason we want to pay attention to this, we want to come back to 5-element theory. The fire element relates to the soul, the human expression. So if we think about that, the soul and the spirit of a person relates to fire in the sense that fire is warm, it's life-giving, people want to be around it, there is movement and activity. And when we see the look on his face, that sort of dull, apathetic, shell-shocked look, that's not particularly favorable in face reading. What they say is that dull, apathetic look is the opposite of fire. It's almost like a form of darkness to a degree. The face should light up when we smile. There should be wrinkling and anima in the face. And when we don't see that, usually this is a sign of trauma, a guilty conscience, or a result of someone having done something heinous. So people that come out of war will have this look. People who have committed crimes and murders will have this look. So I want to bring you to a couple examples. One is O.J. Simpson, and the other one is Chris Watts, and then you can see this picture here of Jeffrey Dahmer next to him. If you look at the congruency of their faces, there's a sort of dull, apathetic, sedate look that's not great. The photo of O.J., this was after he had committed his murders. They took his photo. Chris Watts, the guy in the middle who was convicted of killing his wife, his 2 children, and his unborn child, this photo was taken while he was being arrested for the first time for those murders. And the one of Jeffrey Dahmer, that is his mugshot after having committed murder. And you will see this sort of dull, apathetic look. We're all going to have this look sometimes because of acute trauma, but Eastern theory says you shouldn't stay in a state like that. We should shift gears and move into other things. And when we see that look too consistent, usually that means spirit suppression. The spirit is being muted either as a result of having done something horrible, a guilty conscience, trauma. There's something going on. So if we see this look long-term, it's not great. It's something you really want to pay attention to and be mindful of, and I would say have some caution around. So outside of that, something to pay attention to with that look on people's faces. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is his mouth. You'll notice that he's got a very full lower lip. Characteristically, in face reading theory, what they say is that a full lower lip relates to hedonistic tendencies. Typically, a person who has kinks, fetishes, really enjoys sex and being risky with sex and sort of doing those things that are taboo. Unfortunately, if you read about Jeffrey Dahmer, killing and getting a sexual thrill, they were very closely related. And when we see this in a person, this points to a larger yin-yang disharmony in the sense that yang relates to life and birth, yang relates to that life and movement and activity of life. And then the yin side relates to contraction and death, right? A slowing down of life and moving into that eternal sleep. So sexual energy is very closely aligned with creative energy because it's the ultimate creative act. You're literally creating another human life. When a person gets thrill from taking life, sexual energy, which should be creative and becomes destructive and death-oriented, this is a very severe disharmony in the yin-yang balance of how things should move in life for longevity, for health, and for just a better world. So this was very evident in his life. And that lower lip, again, if a person has this, that doesn't mean that they're a serial killer, okay? It doesn't mean that. Usually it points to something in the sexual sphere, but in his life terrain with his consciousness and his Shen, this pointed to these hedonistic tendencies manifesting in, killing and that sexual thrill being melded. Again, not a very pleasant thought to think about, but it is real. Now, he also has these downturned edges here, these shadows that show up here. These are called disappointment lines. So what I've seen over the years and what face reading theory says is that people typically have a pessimistic outlook. They're disappointed with how they feel they are living their life. They're disappointed about how things go in their life, or they feel really crummy about who they are and what they are. So usually people who are killing and doing really horrible things and they see the ramifications, whether they tell themselves it's cool or it's not, deep down, I think at a soul level, we know. So again, he's got these lines, so it's probably pointing to a very unhappy nature internally. He's also got this line here, which is a lifestyle depletion marker. When we see a divot here or a big shadow here, this means the person usually is predisposed. If it's skeletal, that means they're kind of predisposed to lifestyle depletion. But if that line shows up, the wrinkle, that means that usually the lifestyle metrics on multiple fronts are depleting in nature. So this one you want to pay attention to. It's like multiple areas you're leaking and it's starting to carve into your life, and you want to be careful to not do that. But again, given his internal terrain of what he was going through, there is some congruency here. He's also got this attention marker, which I found interesting. And I kind of tried to make sense of that in terms of looking at his life terrain, and that he wanted attention from men very badly. And when he didn't get it, it really put him into a dark place. And when he got it, he felt alive. So this attention marker, while not particularly, photogenic or like really made for the camera per se with Jeffrey Dahmer, he needed that attention. And I think that showed up in his behaviors and how he killed and whatnot. Now, in looking at his natural face, public persona, and inner persona, I'd like you to take a look at these faces. So the public persona, your right side, the other person's right side, that's their public persona. Their left side or your left side relates to the inner persona. And all I do with these images, I take the left side and then I mirror it and stack the images together to get an image of what the inner persona looks like in the public persona. So if you look at his face, the public persona is very wide. It's very accessible. It's very open. When we see broadness and openness, typically that points to an accessibility. There's an ability usually for the person to kind of like see the big picture and be able to allow things in and allow people in and opportunities and what things. So openness is technically good. His public persona is wide and open. But then when you look at the inner persona, I feel like we get a better look at who we're dealing with. These are closer set eyes. The face looks a lot more intimidating, and it looks like there's something else going on in there. And you can just see the discrepancies in terms of his face. One side is wide and one side is narrow. And so when we talk about congruency in face reading, what we're trying to get to is that congruency is good. Congruency of theory, but congruency of features and how you should be living, that's congruent. But when we see massive discongruency and things are really different, like the public persona is very different from the inner persona, this is usually a state of conflict. And again, it doesn't mean serial killer explicitly. It just means big, sizable differences in terms of what the person shows to the external world and what they're showing to the inside, right? What they're feeling on the inside, what they're going through and what they're navigating. So it's very hard to say with a person like this, what lifestyle advisement would I give to a person like this, if he were still alive? It's so hard to say, because if the wiring is really dark on the inside, I feel like that's very difficult. This isn't like just navigating like, I tell white lies. This is, I take human life. This is very different. The things that I've always speculated and I wondered about is when people are that far gone in terms of their spiritual orientation to life and to the world, I always wonder, I don't know if this would work, but, getting into a deep state with psychedelics, things like ayahuasca, and who knows, if the darkness is that deep, maybe it would break the person. I don't know. Maybe it would make them. I really don't know. But I feel like a spiritual reckoning in some capacity has to happen. And usually people can't talk their way out of these things. They have to be shown or experience things or have substances that go in and kind of rewire the brain, like psilocybin and things like this. So these would be the things that I would be kind of, in theory, talking to him about. But he's also got these really dominant eyebrows. And they're interesting because they don't really stand out, but when you look at them, they're thick and they're dominant. And this relates to the wood metrics. So this can be anger and aggression outwardly expressed if they're not careful. It can also be very creative and open, like someone who's got a materially create things. But when we see wood metrics, we also have to pay attention to sexual energy, because the wood element has very strong ties to the sex drive of a person and how much they want and how long they last in bed. So again, we see some pretty strong sexual themes in his life terrain, but again, these were all manifesting pretty negatively. So that's all I've got for Jeffrey Dahmer today. If you guys have questions, please let me know. And if there's someone else you'd like me to read, as always, let me know. Thanks.